The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters, and he restores my soul. He leadeth me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. And yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies, and thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. I'm Allene Gaither, and I was born in 1925 in Rowan County in Kannapolis. My favorite food, Burger King Whoppers. Burger King Whoppers.
Whoppers.
Yeah. And fries, I love them. I love
Burger King to pay us for that ad.
Yeah. President Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, because he did so much for our country. And I lived during that time that history was made and experienced the changes. Oh my goodness, I've got so many favorite movies. Well, I don't know whether I'm going to say Gone with the Wind or not, but that's the one I've looked at most. And if we go by stars, I enjoyed Gregory Peck's To Kill a Mockingbird. And if it's Lana Turner, which she was one of my favorites, it was Madam X. That's all I can think of right now. My favorite musician is Willie Nelson. I just like to hear him sing. He does it his way. It's different from anybody else. And it's like he sings from his heart. Like he means what he's saying. And I don't know, I just like him. And he's getting on pretty old, you know. What I remember most is being happy, I think. I had a real good relationship with my sisters. I had 3 younger sisters, and we were all happy together, especially in the summer when school was out, and we had the days seemed to be long, and we had those summer days just to play and do nothing until school started again. I loved it. My favorite memories, I have so many memories. I just don't know what was favorite. I think just being together and doing things together. And we sang a lot and we told stories. And I used to make up stories and tell them, and they just eat it up. They believed everything I said. I guess it was because I was the oldest. My father's father, my grandfather, along about that time, I can't remember exactly when World War One was over, but it was somewhere along that time that the boll weevils got into the cotton crops down there, and the cotton crops were the farmers' money-making thing for the day, not the day, but for the year. That was what they all depended on. But this boll weevil got into the cotton crops and ate the bulbs and destroyed the whole crop. So the farmers had to see if they couldn't do something to make up for that and survive. So my grandfather had some relatives that had already moved up to Kannapolis to work in the mill because the mill was growing and becoming very famous, and a lot of people were moving into Kannapolis from all around. And so my grandfather packed up his family. Now, nobody told me this. I just imagined it because it was the time of year that it was. And I imagined that my grandfather just packed up everything in his covered wagon and headed for Kannapolis. I don't know how long it took him to get here, but he had been promised a job and a house to live in. And so when they got here, Mr. Cannon, owner of the mill, gave him and his family a very nice house in a good location, which was fairly close to the mill. And they moved in, and I guess my Aunt Niner, my daddy's sister, that stayed at home and took care of her parents, but she went to work in the mill, and I don't know how many of them did, but anyway, that's where they wound up. And my grandfather was a very good carpenter, so he worked with a carpenter crew in the mill, building houses in the village, which was growing real fast. So that's where I was born. That's where my mother and father met each other and got married, and that's where I was born, and that's where I was raised. That's where I grew up. Everything was so different back then. It was just a wonderful world until I was a teenager, and of course we had to go to war. My mother was a member of the Church of God. Now my daddy wasn't raised to go to church, but my mother was. She was always in Sunday school as she grew up because her father went to church. And he took as many of his kids that wanted to go. So she was a real, uh, well, they were called holiness women. Holiness, I think. Anyway, she went to the Church of God. That's where she took all of her girls. We grew up in that church, and we were firm believers in the Bible and in God and trying to live your life right. But as I grew older and I became a teenager, I had gone to visit other churches with some friends, and I belonged to the Brownies, which was the Girl Scouts, and I belonged to the Brownies at one of the churches where my friend went, and I just enjoyed that so much. When I became a teenager, I wanted to go to that church, and it was a Methodist. I wanted to be a Methodist, and so finally that's where I went. I broke away from the Church of God, and I went to the Methodist Church, and that's where I've stayed all the time, or the rest of my life. And the church that I belong to now is Harmony Grove United Methodist Church, and it's not very far from here, and I enjoy that church immensely. My mother was a very strong woman. I'm proud of my mother. Well, I don't know just how many grandchildren we had for her, but she was getting quite a few. And every time we would have like a dinner or a celebration, and we would go to her house, and we would, everybody would eat and talk, and we would have a wonderful time. And she'd get out this little book of poems that she used to read. She loved to read. And I think that she was so very fortunate because she lived to be 95 and she could read. She could read up until the time she passed away. So that's really good, you know? But anyway, she'd get out this little book of poems, and she would read The Raggedy Man. That was her favorite poem. And she would always read that to all the little kids. And they all would just sit around her on the floor and listen. They would listen very good. She made it interesting, and they loved it, and she loved it. And I can just remember still how she would get kind of tickled sometime when she would be talking about that and saying things. And she enjoyed it as much as they did. This is about the old Raggedy Man. The old Raggedy Man. He works for my pa, and he's just the goodest man that you ever saw. Why, he comes to our house every day, and he waters the horses and feeds them hay. He opens a shed, and we all just laugh when he drives out our little wobbly calf. And if our hired girl says he can, he milks the cow for Elizabeth Ann. Ain't he a mighty fine Raggedy Man? Raggedy, raggedy, raggedy man. Now the old Raggedy Man, he's just so good. He splits the kindling and he chops the wood, and then he spades the garden too. And he does most things that boys can't do. Why, he climbed clear up in our big tree, and he shook the apple down for me. He shook another one down for Elizabeth Ann. Then he shook another one down for the Raggedy Man. Ain't he a good old Raggedy Man? Raggedy, raggedy, raggedy man. Now, the old Raggedy Man, he knows most rhymes, and he tells them if I be good sometimes. He knows about giants and griffins and the elves and the squiddick squeeze that swallows themselves. And right by the pump in our pasture lot, he showed me the hole that the womps has got, what lives way down deep in the ground and can turn into me or Kathy or Rosalie Ann. Ain't he a funny old raggedy man. Now, one time when he was making this little bow and arrow for me, he says, when you get big like your pa is, are you going to be a rich merchant and wear fine clothes? And what are you going to be, goodness knows? And I said, I'm just going to be a raggedy man. I'm going to be a mighty fine raggedy man. Raggedy man. I was very young during the Depression, so I don't remember too much. I don't remember seeing a lot because we lived out of town, but I remember hearing a lot about how a lot of people were going hungry. People were trying to find a place to work, trying to find jobs to make money to live, having a real hardship. But we were very fortunate because we had relatives all around us that had, we lived near one of my aunts, my daddy's older sister, and she lived on a farm. And of course, there was a cow and plenty of chickens. I don't remember what we had. I was only like about, 8, 9 years old. But I can't remember ever going hungry. We had plenty of milk, butter, eggs, and my daddy always raised hogs, and we had ham all the time. Oh, what I wouldn't give for a slice of bacon. Well, I could just smell that bacon cooking. When I went to my grandma's self's, my Aunt Nana cooked bacon in the mornings, and it was wonderful. It smelled so good. But you see, I can't remember really how bad it was because my daddy, what I remember best of all, my daddy developed diabetes, and that was back when the doctors really didn't know too much about it, or else they didn't know how to treat it. The only thing they could give him was insulin, and he had to have that insulin above everything else. And my mother usually kept a job in the mill. She was a spinner, and she worked. She supported our family financially. You had to have a little bit of money because you had to buy that medicine. But anyway, that's about all I can remember. That it was, we were poor, but everybody was poor. World War II, I was in school and I was going into my senior year in high school. And what I remember is we had news all the time of the war, and as soon as we, well, they didn't wait till we graduated. If some of the boys were the right age, they were drafted. And I remember like a big vacancy of not having the boys around anymore, the ones that we used to have in our group. And I remember everything was rationed, everything went for the war effort. Our meal transferred over to making material, for one thing, to furnish the military, like sheets and towels, and probably made some material to make uniforms. I'm not sure, but they probably did. And I can remember mostly when we would see one of the boys in uniform, we were taught to really have great respect and feelings for these people because they were fighting for our country. And I just can't tell you everything that I can remember, but one thing was I met my husband, and I think that was almost like love at first sight, because after he had served a year overseas in North Africa and Sicily, he was in the invasion of Sicily, and when he came back, we got married. My husband's father worked in the mill. My father worked in the mill. They worked in the same department, and they knew one another. And so I knew they had moved into Kannapolis from Salisbury, and I didn't know any of them till my cousin lived close to where they moved to, and she said, they've got a son that's in the service, and he's coming home, and I want us to go over there and meet him. And I said, okay. So I was driving my daddy's car, and my sister Kat, Kathleen, we called her Kat, she and my cousin Claudine got in the car one day, one afternoon, and drove over to his house. And his brother that we knew that was in school with us came out. We just drove over there and blew the horn. And he came out, and we said, is your brother here? And he said, yeah, he's here. And we said, we'd like to meet him. So he went back in the house, and he come back out, and he said, he'll be out here in a little bit. So we sat there and waited, and in a little bit, here he came in his uniform, and he had gotten his hat, and he didn't put it on right then. He was just carrying it. But then he got on out to the car, and he put his hat on. And I was driving, and I said, you want to sit down? And he said, yeah. So he got in the car and sat down, and we was talking for a while, and I was very attractive to him. And so I said, I had it was like a whole gang of school kids, was all about the same age, and we would get together on Saturday nights a lot of times and just hang out. So we were going to have a weenie roast, and I invited him to the weenie roast, and he said, "Well, can I take you?" And I said, "Oh, we don't date. We don't come in couples. Everybody just comes with everybody." So when the Saturday night came, don't you know, here he came to the weenie roast with another girl. Well, anyway, that that kind of set me off because I really did want to go with him, you know. I was very attracted to him, and so I didn't see him all the next day. That was Sunday. And Sunday night, he was over at my aunt's house, and there was my sisters and Claudine, and I guess I can't remember who else was over there, and he was there. And so when I went over there, we got together. We just told each other we liked each other pretty good. So before he went back, he was home on furlough. And then when he went back, he said, "Will you write to me?" And I said, "Yes." And so we started writing letters back and forth. And he came home, and he had another furlough in October. And he came home, and when he did, he said, "What would you say if I asked you to marry me?" And I said, "Oh, I don't know what I'd say, but I was kind of hoping you would." So the next thing I knew, he got me a ring, gave me a ring, and then when he went back to camp, he was stationed down in Texas at that time because they had sent his outfit down to Texas to guard an oil refinery on the coast down there. And so when he went back, it wasn't long till he was sent up to Newark, New Jersey, and then that's where he's put on a ship and sent across the Atlantic and landed in North Africa. So in North Africa, he fought Rommel. Rommel, is that the way you pronounce his name? The Desert Fox, the German general that was over there with all the tanks. So that's who they fought all the way across. Well, not all the way across, but I'd say like about halfway across North Africa, where they would embark and go across to Sicily, which was located at the boot from Italy. That's the only way I can explain it, because when I'm thinking about it, I can see it in my mind. And that's where they invaded Sicily. Now, you didn't hear as much about that invasion as you did the one in Normandy, but it was there, and it was a bad one, and a lot of the boys were lost there. But that's where my husband was hurt, in Sicily, and from there he was sent to back to a hospital in North Africa, and they patched up his right leg and ankle and foot. He was really fortunate that he didn't lose his foot, because somewhere or other it was crushed, and he had to wear that cast that was on his leg for, he never would talk about it. It was too bad to talk about, and he never would talk about it. So I really don't know much about it, but he was just sent back home, and it was on a hospital ship from somewhere in North Africa. They put the boys aboard the hospital ship and came back across the Atlantic, and they landed in Norfolk. And it was like right around Christmas Day. And from Norfolk, they put him on a train and took him to White Sulphur Springs in West Virginia. And that's where he was when we got married, because as soon as I heard he was up there, his mother and his brother and I went up there. His brother had a car, and he drove it, and we went up there to see him. And I was so happy that he was home safe. I wanted to be a beautician. I had always loved to mess with hair, and all three of my sisters really, I guess, got pretty tired of me wanting to roll their hair and do stuff with it, you know. I always had to love, I just loved doing somebody's hair. And so that's what I made up my mind I wanted to be. After I graduated from cosmetology school and worked off my apprentice, I opened my own shop and worked there for 20 years and really enjoyed the work. It was wonderful, and we started off with a bang. We had done a lot of advertising, and I had a brand new building, and they had equipped it for me. And we opened up just a few days right before Christmas, and before we opened up, I had hired 3 girls to come and work with me, and one of the girls was one that went to school when I did, and she and I had become good friends, and she was like my right arm. I don't know what I'd have done without her, but anyway, I called them and I said, how close do you want me to book these appointments for you to do? She said, book them all, book them all. Well, I just didn't realize that the other 2 girls I hired were just out of school and didn't have the experience of working under pressure. You know, like when you get them backed up, you get behind and you feel pressure. So it was just hard on them. Anyway, we finally got through that, and we worked there. We stayed there and worked, what, 20 some years. I just enjoyed doing the work, and I never wrote down dates of anything. But anyway, that was the main thing in my life. I enjoyed it thoroughly. It was back during the day where we did big hair and lots of hairspray, and a lot of the people that came in smoked. The girls that worked in the shop, sometimes they would smoke and lay a cigarette down, and I was all the time having to tell them to put that cigarette out. But little did I realize that being in that shop all day long, every day, year after year, was taking its toll on my breathing. And so I wound up with COPD and had to get out of the shop because I had to get out of the hairspray and out of the chemicals that we used on hair. So that was that. So it had its day, and I enjoyed it. The favorite place I visited and the trip that I had wasn't on a tour. We planned our own tour. My sister Blondie, which is two sisters down from me, her son is a minister, and he had a church in Japan, Memaw, Japan. That's north of Tokyo. And so he invited us to come over there and visit them. So my sister, his mother, my sister, between us, the one that was like my buddy the rest of them for their whole life, she was just like my buddy. She was my best friend. And then my youngest sister was traveling in the Bahamas with her husband, so she wasn't here to go, but we wanted four. And so I called my cousin that lived in Thomasville, and I said, "Do you want to go to Japan?" And she said, "Oh, yes," because she was just like me. She was always ready to go if the opportunity came up. So we four girls made our plans. I worked with a tour guide and a tour business, and I worked with her, and we had everything planned out from the time we left till we got back home. And so we went to Tokyo. We boarded a plane in Charlotte, flew to Chicago, changed planes in there in Chicago. So we got to Hong Kong. It was like about 1 o'clock in the morning. And they put us in the executive suite because they didn't have our accommodations ready. So we really had this luxury suite. It was beautiful. But anyway, the next morning, the first thing we did was check into tours that were being made over Hong Kong so that we could see as much as possible while we were there, because we were going to stay there, I think, about 3 days, 3 or 4 days, 3 days maybe. Anyway, we had a tour over China, and that was really something. Not over whole China, just over Hong Kong. And then, we went to the market, and we just went wild buying those robes, those Chinese robes made out of that silk. We just went wild buying those things. They were a good price, and we said, "Oh boy, this will make a good souvenir." And we didn't think about packing them to bring them home. But anyway, we got back to Tokyo, And we were supposed to leave Tokyo and go to fly to another island. Right now, I can't think of the name of it. But my husband's sister's son was in the Navy, and he was stationed. He was stationed over there. I'm trying to Okinawa. He was stationed in Okinawa. So we were going to fly over there and spend the night with his wife. Their 2 kids was over there. And so we flew over there and spent the night. And the next day she took us on a tour around the island. And shortly after, we had lunch there. And it was a beautiful place. It was a place that they had built, I think, just especially for the military that was there, because there was a lot of it there. And so then we boarded the plane and we flew back. And I was so impressed because you could sit back in your seat on that plane and it looked like you was looking out the windshield. Had this big mirror up here. Not mirror, screen. And we flew back home to Tokyo. When we got to Tokyo, there was my nephew, Dimps, and his wife and son waiting for us. And we got together with them. And the next day, we were scheduled to catch the bullet train that goes so fast. I think that's where it got its name. It travels so fast. Anyway, it took us all day to get up to Memaw, where they lived. And when we got there, it was already dark. And they had the church van out there to pick us up and take us to the parsonage. And Opal, my cousin, Opal and I, they didn't have room for all 4 of us in the parsonage, so Opal and I went with the lady that she was an American, and she was there teaching English to the kids and had room to keep us. So we stayed with her, and she played the piano at the church and the organ, and we really enjoyed visiting my nephew's church. It was a small church, but it was non-denominational, and we met a lot of people from a lot of different places. And we stayed there for a week, and they took us to up further north to Cherry Blossom Festival, a large festival in a beautiful park. And we spent the day up there. And I never will forget, we was walking and looking, and there was these Japanese guys had something spread out on the ground, out on the grass under this big tree, and they were dancing. And we just stopped. We were in the little walkway, and we just stopped, and we were standing there looking at him, and he was motioning, come on, dance, come on and dance. And I didn't dare. But later I thought, why didn't I go out there and dance? I usually just jumped right in, but I didn't. And so we came on home and stayed the rest of our week there, just touring places. And we went to visit one of the people that came to his church that was recovering from having a baby, and I think her problem was they had given her too much blood or the wrong kind of blood or something, but she was still in bed, and her bed was on the floor. We went up, she was upstairs, and they took us up there, and it was one of those beds they threw out on the floor and slept, and then in the daytime they rolled it up and stored it back somewhere. Anyway, and we saw the baby, and that was nice. And finally we went, it was time to leave and go, and our train was going to leave about after dark. So we went, and we failed to make reservations when we got there on the bullet train going back to Tokyo. So it was filled up, and we had to take this slow boat to China. No, we took this slower train, and it took the rest of the night. But we finally got there sometime the next day. And the girl who was the patient that we went to see, her husband worked in Tokyo, and he promised he would meet us and get us to the right airport to catch our flight back towards home, because we were going to Hawaii. And so we made it. He was there, and he took us and put us on the bus to go to the airport. We went to the airport and boarded the plane and flew to Hawaii. We spent several days in Hawaii, right near the beach, and enjoyed that. I had been there before, and I knew a little bit about getting around, like tours they would want to take. But all too soon, it was time to leave and come home. So that's what we did. Several times when we had a short trip booked with Christian Tours, I would call Yvonne to see if she could be available to go with us. And when she did go, it just made the tour a whole lot better. And we just had a wonderful time, just being together and seeing different things, and being in a different place. I haven't painted any in, well, probably, I don't know, I'd say close to a year. I just, I just don't know what happened. I just lost my desire to paint, and, well, not completely, because I would really like to paint if I could just make myself get started again. But for a while, I just haven't been able to pick up a brush. I just one of those things. Having a painter's block is, what's her name on Golden Girls used to say. She was having a writer's block. I said I was having a painter's block. I guess those things happen. My favorite painter is Bob Ross, because he can just turn a plain canvas into a beautiful scene in 30 minutes. And he explains how he does it. And I have several of his books, and he tells you exactly the colors he uses, the brush that he uses, or brushes, because you use a different brush for a different technique. And it does a lot of explaining. I did years ago. I did. I was sitting on the beach at Rodanthe, at the Outer Banks. I'm sitting on the beach. The ocean's here, and I'm painting the pier. And I guess that was one of my favorites. I never thought I'd live this long. And when you start aching all over and things start failing, like your hearing and your sight and your smell, I still have my taste. I still have my appetite. But I just talked to God and I asked Him what is that He's got me here for? What am I supposed to do? Um, he must have me living for something. Um, I just have to be on the lookout, and if He does show me, I've got to be ready and not miss it. I'm a very fortunate woman. I have a wonderful daughter, and her husband is the same. And they take such good care of me. They let me live here. And I told them this is my home, and their home, and it's our home. And I know at times it's not easy. It's got to be hard, and it's wearing and tearing on them. I realized how it is to look at a person that's not well. But I'm just so thankful, so very, very thankful for my life that I have. And one of these days, I trust that God's going to show me what He wants me to do before the final days are here. But when it is, I want you to know, and everybody to know, that I am ready. I'm ready. When He's ready, I'm ready.
What are we singing?
She's singing in the pines.
In the pines, where the sun. Is that too high?
You think of so many things you would like to tell them, and usually you can't think of them whenever you have the opportunity to do it. But I would say this is really a tough old world at times. You just have to hang in there and do the best you can when you meet something that's giving you a little hardship. Always remember your mom and dad will always be there to take care of you and never guide you the wrong way. So always listen to them and do what they tell you to. When you travel this road, life is like a road and a journey from beginning to end. As you travel this road, always Be kind to the people that you meet, and take advantage of every opportunity you have that will make your life better. Always take advantage of school. School is the main thing in your life as you grow to be an adult. Just hang in there. Be good. Always good. Look for the good in other people, but be particular who you associate with. Be sure you know them well enough to not get into any kind of trouble. Always look ahead before you travel on.